Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another Serenity House Impact lesson. Today, I'm going to be discussing opioids and the different types of legal and illegal drugs associated with them. Some of you may already have a pretty good understanding of what opioids are, but let me give a quick rundown of just a few facts so that way we're all on the same page. So for starters, opioids are a narcotic drug which is derived from the opium poppy plant. These types of drugs are referred to as opiates, but in most cases today, opiates and opioids are interchangeable. But many opioids are part synthetic, meaning that it's been altered or created in a lab. These types of drugs can produce a variety of effects, which include things like lowering your heart rate, your blood pressure, and even your breathing. But in cases where high doses are consumed, it can actually produce feelings of disorientation and hallucinations. But the main reason why people tend to use opioids is for pain relief. Opioids can be prescribed by a medical doctor, and you might even be familiar with some of these names, things like Oxycontin, hydrocodone, Vicodin, and even morphine, just to name a few. But there's also the illegal versions of these drugs, things that have been altered to increase the potency and the high feeling people tend to get. The street names for these drugs include things like heroin and fentanyl. But regardless of whether these drugs are legal or illegal, they are all highly addictive. In fact, there were over 70,000 deaths in 2019 that were attributed specifically to opioid overdose. However, it's important to note that 73% of those deaths were linked directly to a synthetic drug, like heroin or fentanyl. So how exactly do opioids work and why are they so addictive? So it is important to understand the brain a little bit and how it works. And in my previous videos, I have talked about how the brain functions and the different areas of the brain and how they can be affected by different drugs like alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. But one of the interesting things that comes from opioids is that there's actually these receptors in the brain called opiate receptors, believe it or not. And so anytime that you take an opioid, it's going to impact that area of your brain. And it actually sends signals to the rest of your body that correlate specifically to pain and feelings of pleasure. In fact, this area of the brain that's impacted by pain and pleasure is the same area that's impacted when we do things like exercise or laugh. So when we exercise and we push our body to its limit, our brain actually releases this hormone called endorphins. And endorphins are designed to be a painkiller. Now, you might have actually heard the concept before, a runner's high. And this is basically when someone runs and they're pushing their body to the limit and they're constantly putting pressure on their knees and their legs. It's gonna hurt, but those endorphins start to release in the body and they feel really good, and so they just keep running. That's a runner's high. And the same concept applies with laughing. So when you laugh, all your stomach muscles and the organs inside are constricting together. And let's be honest, that can kind of hurt. And I'm sure you've laughed so hard that it does hurt, right? But there's also this concept of laughing feels really good. And the reason why is because when your body is in pain, the endorphins start to rush through and help with that pain. So this is why laughing can feel really good, even though sometimes it can hurt. Now, on a more extreme level, endorphins can actually save your life. So, how many of y'all have broken a bone before? Now, if you have experienced this, I just want to ask, did it hurt initially when you broke your bone, or did it hurt more later down the road? Like when you were trying to recover, or maybe by the time that you got to the hospital? A lot of people admit that the initial break didn't hurt nearly as bad as maybe 30 minutes or an hour after it happened. And a lot of this is due to the fact that the endorphins in your body are trying to alleviate as much pain as possible, among other things like the adrenaline that's rushing through your body as well. But all of these chemicals are designed to help you feel good. And that's what the opiate receptors in your brain do. However, there are times where people can experience severe levels of pain. Maybe it's due to a car accident or a sports injury, or maybe it's a medical illness like cancer. And so a doctor might prescribe a very powerful opioid like morphine or hydrocodone to help alleviate that pain. Many hospitals actually use morphine to help patients that are in pain. And if you've ever been on morphine before, you know how loopy it can make you.
So can you tell me a little bit about it? Is it good? Do you remember anything?
I don't remember nothing.
Do you know
All I know is I feel awesome. You're great.
Yeah.
You gotta try this stuff, dude.
I'm about to, actually.
When we're chilling on this, we're gonna be vibing out.
Alright.
Oh!
However, after a patient has left the hospital, the doctor might still prescribe them an opioid to help them recover. Now, one of the issues that I've stated before is that all of these drugs are highly addictive. And so the problem is that when someone finishes their medication, and they're no longer in need of it, they're completely healed, their brain chemistry has changed a little bit, and so they might actually start to experience feelings of withdrawal. This is due to the fact that when a person uses a powerful drug like an opioid, it actually causes the brain to struggle to create the natural chemicals it needs, things like noradrenaline. This chemical specifically is designed to help with blood pressure, body temperature, and even breathing. So because the natural receptors in your brain are taking in more of the drug rather than the natural chemicals, your body starts to produce more of those chemicals to try and offset the balance. The problem is that once you stop taking the opioids, there's still the offset of chemicals going on in your brain and in the rest of your body. This is what can cause you to have feelings of withdrawal. So when it comes to opioid withdrawal, you can experience things like nausea, bone and body aches, vomiting, upset stomach, chills, fever, and even diarrhea. And unfortunately, any kind of withdrawal usually takes about 2 weeks, and with opioid withdrawal, it could last up to a month. So imagine having the flu for an entire month. Pretty awful, right? So this is why doctors are working a lot harder to better understand the cause and effect of opioids, and they're even looking at different alternatives in order to help people alleviate their pain. And the sad truth is that there's a lot of people that are opioid dependent, and they might not be able to get a prescription anymore, and so they look at alternative options, like buying off the black market or going on the street. For some of these people, their story might begin with a car crash, and it took them months to recover, all while under the influence of opioids to help with their pain. But now they go to their doctor and say, I need more prescription, and the doctor says, no, you're good, you're healed. Well, unfortunately, their brain chemistry is still jumbled up, and they feel bad. They feel like they need more medicine, but they might not get it from a doctor. So what do? Well, some people might be fortunate enough to receive therapy or rehab to overcome their pain, but others might not be as fortunate. And so their only option is to go out onto the street and try and buy something that's similar, which in this case would be heroin or fentanyl. These kinds of drugs like heroin and fentanyl are highly dangerous and very toxic. In fact, fentanyl is about 50 times more powerful than heroin, and even consuming an amount equal to 2 grains of salt is enough to kill a person. And there's also the added risk that any drug that you get from a dealer could be laced with something like fentanyl. Now, for some, heroin's not just a supplement for an opioid. For some, it could end up just being the next stage in their progression of a drug addiction. I actually want to share with y'all this video clip from CNN, which follows the life of this young man who got caught up in a heroin addiction. So y'all take a look.
I'll describe Kirkwood as your perfect American dream. Nice houses.
The best schools.
What the dealers kind of look for are people who are more affluent and from better off neighborhoods. That way they know that they have the money to actually go and get it.
The enemy is roaring like a lion. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and it's in the form of heroin.
I'm Colton Kalita, and I started using heroin when I was 15. I first tried heroin whenever I was in this room. It's just constant and compulsive, and it just takes over your will and your body.
About 30,000 people live in Kirkwood, Missouri, a well-to-do suburb outside of St. Louis with a median family income of more than $77,000 a year. In this county, heroin deaths are nearly 4 times the national average.
The people that use heroin in Kirkwood can be anywhere from the honor student to like your typical teenage stoner.
Did you ever think that at the age of 15 you would be a full-blown heroin addict?
No, it's not like you wake up one day and think that you're going to be a heroin addict. It just slowly progresses from the small stuff, pot, alcohol, cigarettes, and it just keeps going.
Do most of the people you know try heroin recreationally?
It almost always starts out recreationally. No one starts off thinking, I'm going to do this every day. At first I didn't even like it. The way I saw everyone else was raving about it, so I'm like, well, maybe I should try it again. So then I tried it again, and from then on it was just kind of downhill spiral.
This one's from her dealer. How many beans will I get? 7 or 8? They're like fire. There's no BS. Allie says, I love you, Dad, and I said, I love you, Allie. And then she went into her bedroom, closed her door. She took a capsule of heroin and she snorted it, and it was so powerful she died instantly. Heroin is the first thing I think about when I wake up. It's the last thing I think about when I sleep. I just care about getting high. I wish I had all the money in the world so I could buy all the heroin in the world.
Did you know how deeply into heroin your daughter was?
No, I had no clue. I had no idea. And I discovered this after getting all her notes and all her journals and everything.
I think about how I could have ended up like a lot of people in the area.
Colton's wake-up call came in 2015 when one of his friends suddenly died of a suspected overdose. Both teens had struggled with heroin addiction. It was the second death at Kirkwood in just 14 months.
It tore me open inside. Since then, I've kind of turned it into motivation to stay on the path I am.
Kirkwood High School is aggressively dealing with the heroin problem. After Colton's friend died, more than 80 students reached out to get help for themselves or people close to them.
I've been in recovery since October 20th, 2015.
This story is unfortunately a common one, and I'm so thankful to know that this young man has started a life where he's no longer addicted to heroin. But there's so many young teens out there that do get addicted to these very dangerous and toxic drugs, and many of them, it's taken their life. In fact, I want to show you these brain scans just so you can see how dangerous a drug like heroin can be on the brain. So as you can see here, the areas of the brain that control things like critical thinking, problem solving, as well as just basic functions like eating and sleeping are affected heavily by long-term heroin use. And unfortunately, this kind of damage is something that's going to last the rest of their life. And so I know I say this in a lot of my videos, but I just have to ask the question again. Why would someone, or why would you, choose to take a drug like this and get high? Now, we know that some people do use these drugs just specifically to target their pain, maybe from an injury or an illness. But why would someone choose to take these drugs when they no longer need them? Why would they continue to go out onto the street where it's dangerous and they could potentially be buying something that's lethal? Unfortunately, I think in many ways the answer here is addiction. It's really just the nature of this drug. There's many people that can't stand the pain that comes from withdrawal, and so instead they'd rather go out onto the street and buy a drug that could potentially be lethal or is just going to get them addicted, and they're just going to continue that life cycle. For others, it could have just been the gateway drug. It was an experiment. They just wanted to see what would happen. But what could happen to you or someone you know if they go down this path? Because for many people, their first time was their last time. Whatever the reasoning is for using a drug like this, you should know that your life is on the line if you choose to misuse and abuse these drugs. So what can you do if you know someone who is misusing opioids or is caught in a situation where they've now overdosed from using these drugs? Well, for starters, you obviously need to call 911 if you do witness someone pass out from an overdose. In many cases, a person's life could be saved by using a medication called naloxone. This medication basically just reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. But let's just say that you know someone that is using or mistreating these drugs. What can you do to help them? Well, for starters, by now you should know how dangerous these drugs are. So if I were you, I would seek help. I would go to maybe a parent or a guardian or a teacher or a counselor, just someone that I trusted, and I would tell them what I know. In doing this, they could get help for that person, and you basically save their life because they could potentially find themselves in a situation where they do overdose. So don't be afraid to ask for help, whether it's for yourself or for someone else. You should never be ashamed to ask for help. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that the people that we love and care for are still there with us. So if you see something or know something is going on, don't be afraid, speak up. Alright, so I want to go ahead and wrap up the video here, but I just want to say thank you for your time today. I hope that the information I've shared has been helpful and informative for you, and I will be linking my sources in the description box down below, so if you want to take a look at those, you can learn a little bit more information on opioids. Also, if you're looking for more information on how to help someone who might be struggling with an addiction, I will be linking our actual website in the description box down below, so feel free to go and check that out. Remember that when it comes to your health, the most important thing that you can do is seek the wisdom and advice of those people around you that care for you. I hope that you make the choice today, if you haven't already, to live a life that is free from the negative cycle that can come from a drug addiction. Because your life is worth living for, and you could make an amazing impact in this world by choosing to be a positive influence and have a healthy lifestyle. So with all that said, I hope that y'all have a great day today. Till next time, y'all take care.